My name is Eva, and I'm 58 years old. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, watching my only son Marcus walk down the aisle. I raised him alone after his father passed when he was just 12, working double shifts as a nurse to give him everything he needed. But as I stood in that beautiful wedding venue, searching for my name on the seating chart, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The same feeling I'd been trying to ignore for months whenever I saw how Brittany, his fiancée, looked at me. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, because what I'm about to share will show you how one moment of courage can change everything.
Meet deeds.
The weeks leading up to Marcus's wedding had been a whirlwind of preparation and excitement that I had been dreaming about for years. I'd saved up for months to buy the perfect mother-of-the-groom dress, spending hours at different boutiques, until I found a beautiful navy blue number with delicate beading that made me feel elegant and appropriate. The saleswoman had assured me it was the perfect choice for a September wedding, sophisticated enough for the venue, but not so flashy that it would compete with the bride. I even splurged on getting my hair done at the nicest salon in town, something I rarely did for myself. The stylist, Maria, had known me for years and was so excited when I told her about the wedding. She gave me the most beautiful updo with soft curls framing my face, and when I looked in the mirror, I actually felt beautiful for the first time in months. The gift I'd prepared was especially meaningful to me. It was my late husband's vintage pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather, a beautiful gold piece that had been passed down through 3 generations. I'd had it professionally restored and engraved with Marcus's wedding date, knowing how much it would mean to him to carry a piece of his father with him on such an important day. The jeweler had done an exquisite job, and the watch looked like something from a museum, gleaming and perfect. Looking back now, I realize I should have paid much more attention to the warning signs that had been accumulating over the past 2 years. When Marcus first introduced me to Brittany at a family barbecue, I tried so desperately hard to love her, because he clearly did. She was undeniably beautiful, with long blonde hair that always looked professionally styled, and the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having to worry about money or where your next meal is coming from. But from that very first meeting, there was something about the way she would subtly roll her eyes when I shared stories about Marcus's childhood, or how she'd always find a reason to cut our conversations short. When I'd show her photos of Marcus playing Little League or talk about his academic achievements, she'd smile politely, but quickly change the subject to something about their travels or her career in marketing. I remembered so vividly all those years of working 2 jobs after David died, the exhausting day shifts at the hospital, followed by weekend shifts at a walk-in clinic, just to make sure Marcus could focus entirely on his studies without worrying about money. I was there for every single parent-teacher conference, every soccer game in the rain, every late night when he struggled with calculus homework and needed someone to just sit with him while he figured it out. When he graduated from college with his engineering degree, summa cum laude no less, I felt like all those sacrifices had been completely worth it. I had raised a successful, intelligent, kind young man, despite the circumstances, and I was prouder of him than I'd ever been of anything in my life. But Brittany seemed to view my involvement in Marcus's life as interference rather than the natural love of a devoted mother. During our monthly family dinners, which had been a tradition since Marcus was in high school, she would monopolize the conversation, talking endlessly about her marketing job or their expensive weekend trips to wine country. When I would try to share memories or ask about their future plans, she'd redirect the conversation or suddenly need Marcus's attention for something supposedly urgent. The most telling sign came 3 months before the wedding when I offered to help with the planning. I'd organized plenty of charity events and holiday parties at the hospital over the years and thought my experience might be useful, especially since I knew Marcus's tastes and preferences better than anyone. Brittany politely, but firmly, declined, saying she and her mother had everything completely under control and preferred to keep the planning process small and intimate. I later learned from Marcus, almost by accident, during a casual phone conversation, that Brittany's family was handling most of the major arrangements and that they preferred to work with vendors they'd used before for other family events. It stung that I wasn't even consulted about decisions for my own son's wedding, but I told myself that modern weddings were different from the ones I remembered from my generation. What hurt most during those months was feeling Marcus gradually pulling away from me too. Our weekly dinner dates, which had been sacred to both of us since his teenage years, became monthly, then sporadic, then almost non-existent. When I'd call him, he seemed constantly distracted, always in a hurry to get off the phone, because Brittany needed him for something, or they had plans with her friends. I convinced myself it was just wedding stress, that things would naturally go back to normal after they were married and settled into their new life together. I told myself I was overthinking things, that my motherly instincts were just being overprotective, because I was having trouble letting go of my little boy. Oh, the morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect September days with crisp air and brilliant sunshine that seemed like a blessing from heaven for the happy couple. I woke up at 5:30, far earlier than necessary, but my stomach was fluttering with nervous excitement, and I couldn't stay in bed any longer. This was the day I'd been dreaming about since Marcus was a little boy, playing with toy cars and declaring he'd marry someone just like his mommy. I took extraordinary care, getting ready, soaking in a lavender bath, and then applying my makeup with the precision of a portrait artist. I wanted every detail to be perfect, from my nail polish to the subtle pearl earrings that had been my mother's. When I finally slipped into my beautiful navy dress and looked at myself in the full-length mirror, I saw a proud mother ready to watch her son begin the most important chapter of his adult life. Around 9 o'clock, I called Marcus to wish him luck and hear his voice before the chaos of the day really began. But when he answered, something in his tone immediately struck me as off. His voice sounded strangely distant and flat, lacking the excitement I would have expected from a groom on his wedding day. "Good morning, honey," I said cheerfully, trying to inject enough enthusiasm for both of us. "How are you feeling? Ready to become a married man?" "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine," he replied, but there was none of his usual warmth or affection in his voice. "Look, I'm pretty busy right now with all the last-minute preparations and everything." Of course," I said quickly, not wanting to add to his stress. "I just wanted you to know how incredibly proud I am of you, and how much your father would have loved to see this day. He'd be so proud of the man you've become." There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long, a silence that felt heavy and uncomfortable. "Thanks, Mom. I appreciate that. I'll see you at the venue later, okay?" The drive to Lakewood Manor took about 45 minutes through winding country roads, and I spent the time listening to classical music and trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. I practiced what I might say in my mother of the groom speech if they asked me to give one thinking about funny stories from Marcus's childhood that would make everyone laugh without embarrassing him too much. When I first caught sight of the venue, my breath literally caught in my throat. Lakewood Manor was absolutely stunning, a historic mansion that looked like something from a Jane Austen novel, overlooking a pristine lake surrounded by gardens that seemed to have been designed by angels. White roses and baby's breath decorated every surface, and the late morning light filtering through the massive oak trees created an almost magical, ethereal atmosphere. As I walked toward the main entrance, carrying my carefully wrapped gift and feeling elegant in my navy dress, I felt that familiar surge of maternal pride wash over me. My son had chosen beautifully, I thought. This was exactly the kind of sophisticated romantic wedding he deserved, the kind of celebration that would create memories to last a lifetime. I introduced myself to other guests as they arrived, most of whom I didn't recognize, despite having attended Marcus's birthday parties and graduations over the years. Brittany's family and friends were clearly from a different social circle than ours, carrying themselves with the easy confidence and polished mannerisms that come from generational wealth and exclusive education. I tried to make polite conversation with Brittany's mother, Linda, a perfectly coiffed woman in an expensive-looking cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was courteous, but decidedly cool, asking surface-level questions about my work at the hospital and how long I'd lived in our small town. I could tell she was subtly assessing me, probably wondering how someone from my obviously middle-class background had raised a son successful enough to marry into her family. What struck me as increasingly odd as the morning progressed was that I wasn't being included in any of the traditional pre-ceremony activities that I'd been looking forward to for months. I watched from a distance as the wedding party gathered for formal photos in the garden. But despite several opportunities, no one called me over to join the family pictures that would presumably hang in their home for years to come. When I finally approached the photographer, a young woman with an expensive-looking camera and professional demeanor, she looked genuinely confused when I asked about family photos. She apologized and said she'd been given a very specific shot list by the bride, and none of the planned photos included the groom's mother with the immediate family grouping. I tried hard to brush off the disappointment, telling myself that modern weddings operated differently from the traditional celebrations I remembered from my own generation. Maybe things were just more streamlined now, more focused on the couple themselves, rather than the extended family traditions that had seemed so important when I got married 30 years ago. But as the ceremony time approached and guests began finding their assigned seats in the beautiful garden area, a cold dread began settling in my chest like a lead weight. I made my way to the elegant seating chart display, where beautiful calligraphy on cream-colored paper directed guests to their tables and seats. I scanned the chart 3 times, with increasing panic, looking for my name among the carefully written place cards. Front row, second row, third row, I kept searching methodically, but my name was simply nowhere to be found. Other family members, childhood friends, college roommates, and business associates were all clearly marked with table numbers and seat assignments, but it was as if I simply didn't exist in the world of this wedding.
Poi
With my heart pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears, I made my way through the elegantly dressed crowd, looking for Marcus. My hands were starting to shake slightly, and I could feel a flush creeping up my neck as the reality of the situation began to sink in. I found him near the altar area, looking impossibly handsome in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, adjusting his bow tie and talking quietly with his best man Jake, who had been his roommate in college. For a moment, seeing him standing there, looking so grown up and sophisticated, I felt that familiar surge of overwhelming motherly pride that had sustained me through all the difficult years of raising him alone. This was my baby boy, the child I'd rocked to sleep during thunderstorms and cheered for at countless Little League games. He looked every inch the successful young man I'd sacrificed everything to help him become. "Marcus, honey," I said, approaching him with what I desperately hoped was a calm, composed smile that wouldn't add any stress to his big day. "Could I speak with you for just a moment? I promise I won't keep you long." He turned toward me, and I saw something flicker across his handsome face. Was it guilt? Annoyance? Fear? The expression was gone too quickly for me to properly identify it, replaced by a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What's up, Mom? The ceremony starts in exactly 15 minutes, and I still need to check with the minister about the music cues." "I know, sweetie, and I really don't want to keep you from anything important. I just can't seem to find my name anywhere on the seating chart. I've looked several times very carefully, but maybe I'm missing something obvious." Marcus's face went visibly pale beneath his perfectly applied makeup, and he glanced around nervously, as if looking for an escape route or someone to rescue him from this conversation. "Oh, there might have been some kind of confusion with the final guest list. Let me check with Sarah, the wedding coordinator, and see what happened." But before he could take even a single step away from me, Brittany appeared beside him, like a vision in white, absolutely resplendent in her flowing designer gown that probably cost more than my car. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair was like something from a magazine cover, and she looked like every bride's dream of perfection, except for the expression in her cold blue eyes when they landed on me. "Is there some kind of problem here?" she asked, her voice maintaining that sweet, musical tone that had charmed my son, but carrying an unmistakable edge that made my stomach clench with dread. "Just a small mix-up with the seating arrangements," Marcus said quickly, clearly, hoping to diffuse whatever tension was building. "I'm sure it's nothing that can't be sorted out quickly." But Brittany's expression didn't soften even slightly. Instead, she looked directly at me with those ice-cold eyes, her perfect smile never wavering, but somehow becoming more menacing than reassuring. "Actually, Marcus, there's no mix-up at all. We made very deliberate and careful decisions about our guest list to keep everything intimate and exactly as we envisioned. Unfortunately, we had to make some difficult choices, and there just isn't a seat available." The words hit me like a physical slap across the face. I actually felt the blood drain from my cheeks as I processed what she had just said so casually, as if she were commenting on the weather or the beautiful flowers. No seat available for me at my own son's wedding. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, because I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. "I don't understand. I'm Marcus's mother." "And this is our wedding day," Brittany replied, her tone remaining perfectly controlled and reasonable, as if she were explaining something obvious to a slow child. "We want everything to be absolutely perfect, exactly as we planned and dreamed about. We've worked so hard to create the ideal celebration, and we simply can't accommodate any last-minute changes or additions." She paused, tilting her head slightly, as if considering her next words carefully. "Perhaps it would be best if you just went home." This day is about Marcus and me starting our new life together, and we need it to be perfect. I turned desperately toward Marcus, searching his face frantically for some sign that he would stand up for me, that he would tell this woman that his mother belonged at his wedding, regardless of whatever twisted logic she was using. I needed him to be the man I'd raised him, to be the boy who used to defend kids from bullies on the playground. But instead of meeting my pleading eyes, instead of standing up to protect me the way I'd protected him for 29 years, he looked down at the ground like a coward. When he finally spoke, his words cut deeper than anything Brittany could have said. "Mom," he said quietly, still refusing to look at me, "today is supposed to be about Brittany and me. You've always had a way of making things complicated and dramatic. We just want this one day to be about us as a couple, not about family issues or emotional scenes." Those words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Family issues, emotional scenes. Is that what my love and unwavering support had been to him all these years? I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I'd deferred, every time I'd worked overtime to pay for his textbooks or camp fees or college application costs. I stood there in that beautiful garden, surrounded by white roses and the sound of string music, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 or 40 seconds. I looked at my son, who couldn't even meet my eyes, and at this cold, calculating woman who had somehow convinced him that his own mother was an embarrassment, an inconvenience on his wedding day. Finally drawing on every ounce of dignity I had left, I found my voice. It came out steady and calm, even though inside I felt like I was shattering into a million pieces. "I understand completely," I said, quietly, maintaining my composure despite the pain that was crushing my chest like a vice. "I hope you both have a truly beautiful wedding and a wonderful marriage."
Acid.
I walked back through that elegant venue with my head held high and my spine straight, even though every step felt like I was walking through molten lead. My dignity remained intact despite the devastation I felt inside, because I refused to give Brittany the satisfaction of seeing me break down in front of all these strangers. Every step felt surreal and dreamlike, like I was moving through someone else's nightmare rather than living my own reality. The other wedding guests were beginning to take their seats in the garden, chatting animatedly and laughing, taking photos with their phones, completely unaware of the devastating drama that had just unfolded right in front of them. Children in their Sunday best were running around the edges of the ceremony area, while their parents tried to corral them. Everyone looked so happy and festive, which somehow made my pain feel even more acute and isolating. The drive home was the longest and most agonizing 2 hours of my entire life. I had to pull over twice on the winding country roads because the tears made it impossible to see clearly, and I was shaking so hard I couldn't trust myself to steer safely. All I could think about was the look on Marcus's face when he refused to meet my eyes, or rather his absolute refusal to look at me at all when I needed him most. This was the same little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, trembling and seeking comfort in my arms. The same child who brought me dandelions, picked from our backyard, and called them the most beautiful flowers in the world, because he'd chosen them specially for me. The same teenager who wrote me a Mother's Day card saying I was his hero and his best friend. When I finally made it home to my quiet house, I sat in my car in the driveway for another 10 minutes, just staring at the place where I'd raised him, completely alone for 17 years. The house where I'd nursed him through chickenpox and broken bones, helped him with countless school projects, spread across the kitchen table, celebrated every birthday and achievement and milestone. It felt empty, now hollow somehow, like all those precious memories had been contaminated by what had just happened. Like everything I'd thought I knew about my relationship with my son had been revealed as an illusion. I went inside and carefully hung up my beautiful navy dress, the one I'd been so excited and proud to wear just that morning. It seemed like a costume from someone else's life now. Instead, I put on my most comfortable old pajamas and made myself a cup of chamomile tea, my hands still shaking, as I tried to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. That's when I remembered Sarah Mitchell, the wedding coordinator I'd spoken with several times during the months of planning. She'd been so sweet and professional during our phone conversations, and had mentioned once how much she appreciated working with families where the mother of the groom was so involved and caring, compared to some other weddings where family members seemed indifferent or absent. I still had her business card and phone number saved in my contacts from when she'd called a few weeks earlier to confirm some final details about the timeline and vendor coordination. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my phone to find her number. I hesitated for a long moment before dialing, then picked up my phone with newfound determination. When Sarah answered after 3 rings, she sounded frazzled and stressed, but still maintained her professional demeanor. "Hi, Sarah. This is Iva Williams, Marcus Williams' mother. I hope I'm not bothering you during such a busy time with the ceremony and everything." "Oh no, Mrs. Williams, you're absolutely not bothering me at all. Actually, we're having some concerning issues with the catering situation that just came up. I'm a bit surprised, though. Weren't you supposed to be here for the ceremony? I thought everything was starting in just a few minutes." I took a deep, shaky breath, steeling myself for what I was about to reveal. "Sarah, I need to tell you something that's going to come as a shock, and I'm sorry to put you in this position. I was just informed by my son and his bride that there's no place for me at this wedding. I've been asked to leave the premises." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that I actually checked my phone screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, Sarah spoke, and her voice was filled with complete disbelief and what sounded like genuine horror. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Williams, but I think I must have misheard you. Did you say they asked you to leave? But you're his mother, and more importantly, you're the person who's been paying for most of this entire wedding." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. "What exactly do you mean by that?" "The payments, Mrs. Williams. 80% of all the wedding costs have been coming from the account you established with us 6 months ago. The $40,000 for the venue rental, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, the string quartet, all of it. I naturally assumed that Marcus and Brittany had told you how grateful they were for your incredible generosity." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. Not only had my son allowed his fiancée to humiliate and banish me from his wedding, but they had done it using my own money. Money I'd been saving for 3 years, thinking I was helping to give them the perfect romantic start to their married life together. "Sarah," I said, my voice gaining strength and resolve as the full scope of their betrayal became clear. "I need you to stop all payments immediately. Contact the bank right now and cancel any pending transfers or authorizations. As of this moment, I am withdrawing all financial support for this wedding." "Mrs. Williams, are you absolutely certain about this? This decision will cause some very serious problems with all the vendors and the ceremony is supposed to start in less than an hour. I am completely and absolutely certain. Please send me whatever paperwork I need to sign to make this official, but I want every single payment stopped within the next 60 minutes. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my quiet kitchen as the full reality of what I'd just done began to sink in. I wasn't feeling angry exactly, though anger was certainly part of the complex mix of emotions swirling through me. I was experiencing something much deeper and more profound than simple anger. I was done, finished. I was done being taken for granted, done being treated like my love and support were obligations rather than precious gifts freely given. I spent the rest of that afternoon making methodical phone calls, systematically canceling every payment and service that my hard-earned money was supporting. It was precise, careful work that gave me something concrete to focus on other than the crushing pain in my chest and the betrayal that felt like it might destroy me. By 6 o'clock that evening, my phone started ringing with the persistence of a fire alarm. The first call was from Marcus, and when I saw his name lighting up my screen, I deliberately let it go to voicemail. Then another call immediately after, and another each ring, feeling more desperate and frantic than the last. After the sixth missed call in 10 minutes, I finally listened to his voicemails, and the progression of his emotional state was both predictable and pathetic. The first message was pure rage. "Mom, what the hell did you do? The caterers just packed up everything and left. They said their payment was declined and they can't provide services without guaranteed compensation. Call me back right now and fix this." His voice was shaking with fury, but underneath the anger, I could hear something else creeping in. Panic, the dawning realization that actions have consequences, even when you think you're protected by other people's unconditional love. The second message came 20 minutes later, and his tone had shifted to desperate pleading. "The wedding is completely falling apart, Mom. The musicians packed up their instruments and left. The photographer is demanding payment up front before she'll take another picture, and now they're actually removing the flower arrangements. You need to call the bank right now and fix all the payments. Please, I'm begging you." By the seventh message, his voice had cracked completely. "Mom, please, I know we messed up badly. I know I should have stood up for you, and I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. But please don't ruin Brittany's perfect day. We can talk about all of this later. We can work everything out. But please don't destroy her wedding because of what happened." I almost laughed out loud at that last part, a bitter sound that echoed strangely in my empty house. Don't ruin Brittany's day. What exactly did he think they had done to mine? Then, Brittany herself started calling, and her messages were a masterpiece of manipulation and narcissistic rage. Her first voicemail was pure, undiluted venom. "This is completely childish and pathetic, Eva. You're destroying the most important day of my entire life because your feelings got hurt like some kind of spoiled child. This is exactly why we didn't want you there in the first place. You always make everything about you." But as the evening progressed and the full scope of the situation became clear to her, even Brittany's messages became tinged with desperation, though she couldn't quite bring herself to actually apologize. The wedding had been completely and utterly canceled, with no catering, no music, no flowers, no photography, and no way to pay for any services. There was simply no possible way to continue with any kind of celebration. My phone was also ringing constantly, with calls from confused and concerned wedding guests. Marcus's college roommate Jake called to check if I was okay, having heard from other guests that there was some kind of serious family emergency that had caused the cancellation. My neighbor Janet called because her cousin had been invited and wanted to know what had happened to cause such chaos. Each conversation was awkward and emotionally draining, but I found myself being completely honest about what had occurred. I wasn't trying to make Marcus and Brittany look bad. I was simply telling the truth about what had happened to me. The most unexpected and touching call came from Linda, Brittany's mother. Her voice was tight with embarrassment and what sounded like genuine regret when she called around 8 o'clock. "Eva, I just heard what really happened today from several guests, and I owe you a sincere apology. I had absolutely no idea that you were the one funding this wedding, and I certainly didn't know that my daughter had treated you so cruelly and disrespectfully. This is not how we raised her, and I am completely mortified by her behavior." Linda went on to explain that she'd been told I was simply unable to attend due to a last-minute illness, and that the wedding cancellation was due to vendor problems completely unrelated to family issues. Learning the truth had left her shocked and ashamed. Word was spreading rapidly through social media as well, which added another surreal dimension to the entire situation. Some of the younger guests had apparently posted about the wedding cancellation on their various platforms, and the story was taking on a life of its own as people shared and commented. The general sentiment in the comments seemed to be shock and outrage that a mother had been treated so poorly at her own son's wedding. By 10 o'clock that night, I had accumulated 47 missed calls and countless text messages from numbers I recognized and many I didn't. But I wasn't ready to talk to anyone else yet. I was still processing the enormity of what had happened, still trying to understand how my relationship with my son had deteriorated to this point without me fully recognizing the warning signs. I made myself a simple dinner of soup and toast and sat in my living room looking at all the framed photographs of Marcus growing up that lined the mantelpiece and end tables, birthday parties, graduation ceremonies, family vacations, baseball games, all the moments that had seemed so precious and important at the time. I wondered when exactly I had stopped being his ally and closest confidant and started being seen as his burden and embarrassment. When had my love become suffocating instead of supportive? When had I become the problem instead of the solution? And the next morning brought an insistent knock at my front door at exactly 7 a.m. I looked through the peephole to see Marcus standing on my porch, still wearing his wrinkled tuxedo shirt from the previous day, though it was now completely untucked and stained with what looked like wine or tears. His hair was disheveled and sticking up in places, and even through the distortion of the peephole, I could see that his eyes were red and swollen from crying. I opened the door slowly, but didn't immediately step aside to invite him in. We stood there looking at each other for a long, heavy moment, and I could see the full weight of what had happened settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. He looked younger than his 29 years, more like the lost little boy who used to come to me when he'd made a mistake and needed comfort. "Mom," he started, his voice hoarse and rough, as if he'd been shouting or crying for hours. "I am so incredibly sorry. I messed up so badly, worse than I've ever messed up anything in my entire life. And I honestly don't know how to even begin to fix this." "Come inside," I said, finally stepping aside and holding the door open. "You look absolutely terrible, and we need to talk." He followed me to the kitchen, like a beaten dog, his shoulders slumped and his usual confidence completely gone. I automatically started making coffee, falling into the same routine we'd shared during his college years, when he'd come home stressed about exams, or girlfriend problems, or decisions about his future. But this felt completely different, heavier, more final somehow. "Brittany left," he said, as he slumped into the same chair he'd occupied as a teenager, doing homework at the kitchen table. "She drove back to her parents' house in the middle of the night and sent me a text saying she needs time to think about whether she can ever forgive me for not standing up to you properly." I turned to face him, coffee pot still in my hands, and stared at him in disbelief. Standing up to me properly. He had the grace to look completely ashamed. "That's what she wrote in her text. But I know that's not what really happened yesterday. I know I should have defended you from the very beginning. I know I should have told her immediately that my mother belongs at my wedding, regardless of what she thought or wanted." "Then why didn't you?" I asked, quietly, setting down the coffee pot and sitting across from him at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. Marcus was quiet for a very long time, staring at his hands folded on the table, like he was praying or trying to find the right words. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were filled with tears. "Because she made me feel like I had to choose between the two of you. And I thought if I just went along with her plans and demands, everything would somehow work out eventually. I convinced myself that you'd understand and forgive me like you always have, that you'd be hurt, but you'd get over it for my sake. This isn't about forgiveness, Marcus. This is about respect and basic human decency. About recognizing that the woman who raised you alone for 17 years deserves better than being told she's not welcome at her own son's wedding." "I know," he said, and finally looked directly at me with his father's eyes. "I've been awake all night thinking about what Dad would say if he could see how I treated you yesterday. He'd be completely ashamed of me, wouldn't he?" We talked for over 3 hours that morning, the longest and most honest conversation we'd had in years. Marcus told me about how Brittany had gradually and systematically convinced him that I was too involved in his life, too possessive and controlling, too demanding of his time and attention. She'd made him feel guilty for every phone call home, every dinner we shared, every holiday we spent together, every time he chose to prioritize me over her demands. She said that healthy couples put each other first, always, and without exception. He explained, his voice getting stronger as he talked through what had happened. "And she convinced me that my relationship with you was preventing us from having the kind of marriage she wanted and deserved." "And what kind of marriage was that?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew the answer. "One where we never had to compromise or consider anyone else's feelings or needs," he said, and I could hear the realization dawning in his voice as he spoke the words out loud. "She wanted me to cut ties with you completely after we got married. She said it was the only way we could be truly happy together, without interference or divided loyalties." The conversation was painful, but absolutely necessary. I could see that my son was finally beginning to understand what he had almost lost and what kind of person he had been planning to commit his life to. But I also knew that repairing our relationship would take considerable time and effort from both of us. That afternoon, around 3 o'clock, Brittany called to deliver her final ultimatum. Marcus had put the call on speakerphone, wanting to be completely transparent with me about their conversation and his responses. "Either you choose me or you choose your mother," she said, in that cold, calculating voice I'd come to recognize. "But I am not going to spend my marriage competing with her for your attention and loyalty. If you want to be a mama's boy for the rest of your pathetic life, then we're completely done. Marcus looked directly at me as he gave her his answer. Then I guess we're done, Brittany, because the woman you're asking me to abandon and betray is the reason I became the man you claimed to fall in love with in the first place. I felt genuinely proud of him in that moment, but also deeply sad that it had taken such a dramatic and devastating situation for him to finally find his backbone and remember his values. 6 months later, I was in my back garden planting spring flowers and preparing the soil for tomatoes when Marcus pulled into my driveway right on schedule. This had become our new routine over the past few months, regular Sunday afternoon visits where we worked together on projects around the house and talked about everything and nothing, slowly rebuilding the relationship that had been so badly damaged. Brittany had indeed left town permanently, taking a job offer in Seattle after the story of the canceled wedding had made her something of a local pariah in our small community. The few mutual friends who knew the complete story had not been kind in their judgment of her behavior, and several people had made it clear that her treatment of me was unacceptable and unforgivable. Marcus had spent those 6 months in therapy, working through the ways he'd allowed himself to be manipulated and controlled, and learning to set healthy boundaries in all his relationships. It wasn't easy work, and there were setbacks and difficult sessions, but I could see real changes in him. He was more confident, more decisive, and much more aware of his own values and principles. Our relationship was different now, too, and that was probably for the best. I had to learn to step back and let him come to me rather than always being the one to reach out first or plan our time together. It was difficult at first, breaking habits that had been decades in the making, but it was ultimately healthier for both of us. I met someone, he told me that particular afternoon, as we worked side by side, planting colorful marigolds along the front walkway. Her name is Jennifer, and she's a third-grade teacher at the elementary school downtown. I felt my heart skip a beat, but I tried to keep my voice casual and supportive. "That's wonderful news, honey. Tell me about her." "She's different from Brittany in every way that actually matters," he said, sitting back on his heels and wiping dirt from his hands with the old towel I'd brought outside. When I told her the whole story about what happened at the wedding, she was absolutely horrified. She said any woman who would try to come between a man and his mother isn't someone worth marrying. She sounds like a very wise young lady. She really is, Mom. And the thing is, she's genuinely excited to meet you. She keeps asking when she can come to Sunday dinner and hear embarrassing stories about my childhood that she can use against me later. I laughed for the first time in months, feeling a lightness in my chest that I hadn't experienced since before all the wedding planning had started. I have plenty of those stories saved up. I know you do, and I want her to hear every single one of them. That evening, as Marcus was getting ready to leave, he turned to me with a serious expression that reminded me of his father when David had something important to say. "Mom, I need you to know something important. What happened at that wedding was actually the best thing that could have happened to me, even though it didn't feel that way at the time." "How can you say that?" "Because it showed me exactly what kind of man I was becoming, and it wasn't someone I liked or respected very much. If I had actually married Brittany and gone through with her plan, I would have lost you completely and permanently, and I would have lost myself too." I reached over and took his hand, feeling the calluses from our afternoon of gardening. "You didn't lose me, sweetheart. It would have taken a lot more than one terrible day to make me stop loving you. I know that now, and I'm grateful for that knowledge every single day. But I also know that love isn't enough if it's not accompanied by genuine respect and consideration. I'm sorry it took me so long to learn that essential lesson. As I watched him drive away that night, I reflected on the incredible journey we'd both been on over the past 6 months. The day of that canceled wedding had been one of the most painful and devastating experiences of my entire life, but it had also been a crucial turning point for both of us. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to accept poor treatment, even from the people you love most in the world. Sometimes setting boundaries is the greatest gift you can give to a relationship because it forces both people to examine their behavior and their priorities. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish or vindictive or cruel. It's absolutely necessary for maintaining your self-respect and dignity in a world that will take advantage of your kindness if you allow it to happen. I learned that true love requires healthy boundaries, that respect must be mutual to have any meaning, and that sometimes saying no to someone you love is the most courageous and loving thing you can possibly do. The wedding that never happened taught me that my worth as a mother and as a human being was never dependent on how much others were willing to take from me, but on how much I was willing to value myself. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for what you knew was right? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your love? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own family struggles, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, relationships, and finding the strength to do what's right even when it's difficult. Don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that their self-worth is never negotiable, not even for the people they love most in this world. Thank you so much for listening to my story and for being part of this community. And remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to love yourself enough to walk away from situations that don't honor who you are and what you deserve.